This is session like 10 or something, I don't know, 11. 11. This is Paul's missionary journeys, or Paul's timeline. And like I've been sitting with this material for some time, and I just don't know if there's any good way, unless you are deep within the region of the first century Mediterranean, to really sort of grasp the direction and the fullness of his movement. So I'm going to give you this sheet, and I don't want you to start reading and being distracted by the things that are above it. And if you need to, you can fold it in half. But what I want you, this is I was trying to develop a game for you all, and we're going to give it a go. I don't know if it'll work, or if the scoring is even remotely close, but I kind of ran out of time. So games always take a little longer. But what you have in front of you, I'll wait till Tommy gets that passed around. And I would encourage you not to mark on the sheet. Follow with the sheet, but don't actually draw on it. But what you have in this is you have a list of the cities that Paul went to on his first, second, third, and final journey. And as you look at those, you can see Antioch was the starting point over there in the east. And then, his first journey, then he went, and if you're wondering where Salamis is, it's the easternmost city of Cyprus, the island there. And then he went over to Paphos, and then you can follow that line. He went up to Perga. Are you seeing those where he's gone?
Mm-hmm.
Oh no! Look on the bigger sheet. Yeah, on that map there. That one's just a small reference if you wanted to see them separated. And I realized after I printed it, probably wasn't as helpful as I thought. But the lines are there just to kind of show you the directions. But the point is that if you take this map and you want to look at his first missionary journey, you don't even have to see necessarily all of the cities, but you can see the movement that he went. So if you look at this top one, you can see he went from Antioch down around the island up here, went to Antioch up here, and then made his way back. And so the goal of this is just a reference tool, but these are the three so this will tell you the three different missionary journeys, not including the final one that he goes to Rome. This will tell you the order that he went them in, and then the returning order for the first journey, the second journey made a loop, third journey as well, and the final journey ends in Rome, and that's where he dies in prison. On this sheet up here as well, you'll also see, as we read the stories, in these cities where there are people, these are cities where he met people, notable people in his journey, and a few fun ones. And then where there's a square, it's supposed to look like a letter. These are the cities that he wrote different epistles in. So what I'm going to do is and so this is, you can, and I have a few extra of these. I don't know how many extra there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 3 extra. So if you can write on this if you need to, whatever. But the goal is that I'm going to, and rather than try to retell it, and I don't have the mastery or the expertise, I'm going to read some segments that sort of draw the story that is in Acts onto this map. And if you can see the names of the cities and you can see the order, you can kind of get the sense of his movement, and that's really the goal. Is that you get the narrative, or you get the story that leads you through his journey. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's just put it back in a few. This is taken actually from Kenneth Birding's website, Kindle Afresh. It was adapted by another fellow, and the maps that you have were taken from this. And I have the website. Again, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel, but I want you to kind of walk through and see that. And the best way for me to imagine that is, so 9, Paul was born from Tarsus, so you can see that there on the top northeast of Cyprus on your map. Paul is from the tribe of Benjamin, born in Tarsus. As it was a custom for Jews, his parents had him circumcised on the 8th day. This is all taken from Acts, by the way. He and Jesus were likely born within the same decade. While it was possible for Paul to encounter Jesus before his crucifixion, there's zero evidence of that. And so we typically, when Jews would have referred to Paul, they would have referred to him by his Jewish name Saul, after King Saul, and most Gentiles after they were moving forward would have referred to him as Paul, because once he went through his Damascus Road conversion.
Paul, when they started calling Paul after that.
After his conversion, yeah. He studied under a guy named Gamaliel, who was a teacher of the law. He was a member of the Sanhedrin. He was trained at a young age to be a Pharisee and was a zealot, and so persecuted those who were fading from Jewish identity. So he is kind of if you think about all of the people that Jesus, all the Pharisees that Jesus spoke against in his attack, he would have been within that crowd. So Paul would have been sort of hearing, if Paul did hear Jesus's words, he probably would have elevated the situation because he was such a zealot towards
What's the difference between a Pharisee and a Sadducee?
theology. I mean, there are different religious groups in their functions. One, like Sadducees, didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead or an afterlife. The Sadducees didn't believe in a resurrected body. So, and actually Jews in general at that period probably really didn't believe in the afterlife. So, educated in the Sanhedrin, was a Pharisee. Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to give you sort of the overview of the. But he was blameless, as it says in Philippians 3. He was blameless before the law. So that's the point, is that he was the perfect Pharisee. In year 34, so around probably a couple years after Jesus died, obviously, he's watched the stoning of Stephen, and that's considered our first martyr. Paul was also converted in the same year, and as we all know, he was on the Damascus Road. A light came out. He identified himself as Christ. He was blinded. And eventually his sight was restored, and he received the name Paul, and he goes out. And so again, I'm not going to go too deeply into any of his details before that. In 36 to 46, sometime in that range, Paul will visit Jerusalem and spend some time in his hometown Tarsus. That it's believed that in that 2-week trip to Jerusalem in that range, that he would have met Peter and James. Clearly, Peter and James in their writings acknowledge Paul's authority. So even amongst the apostolic succession that came from the direct eyewitness of Christ on the ground, they would have considered Paul's teachings, Paul's authority, Paul's encounter with Christ as valid. If not, because he's the only apostle really, that was not present for eyewitness seeing Jesus do everything all the other apostles, the 12, were eyewitness to Jesus' miracles.
Why? So why would they consider him?
Because he encountered Christ and they believed in that revelation.
Did they reject him at first because of this reputation?
There's tension between Peter and Paul. There's tension between, it's thought that Luke and Paul, there is not always favorable. So there's tension around there with Paul. I mean, Paul, again, he doesn't have the apostolic succession. He was not with the disciples. He didn't experience the cross. But this is the challenge that we face in the New Testament church. So much of our theology is based on Paul. So Paul, in some ways, is the first systematic theologian, or the first theologian that's taking the events of Christ. But as we found out, and as we looked at last week, Romans was written before a lot of the other letters. So Romans, his theology was formed before he started writing some of the other letters. Yeah.
Did he study with any of the apostles?
Well, and that's what this is saying, is that during that time of 36 to 46, it's thought that it doesn't say that he studied with them, but it's thought that he might have, or that they had intersection because of some of the synergies within the writings. They all point to the same event. If he was at this time before 46, there were no gospels written, so the stories that he would have received about Christ's life would have come through the oral testimony of the community. So he's piecing it together, and again, guided by the Spirit, essentially, is what you're
So what gives him credibility with the churches?
The revelation of God. I mean, the Holy Spirit, I mean, at this point, you have to trust that the Holy Spirit was present and moving and guiding and directing. I mean, the Holy Spirit was a strange beast back then. Ananias and Sapphira, killed because they kept, they cheated on their taxes, so to speak.
And a lot of discussion on the road as he was led blind into the city, and his scales fell from his eyes, and he
I'm sure there was testimony of that amongst believers. I mean,
it was testimony.
I would say that the Spirit gave them belief, because there were lots of false teachers and false, so, there was some level of discernment to the point that, and again, when he was writing these, he wasn't trying to write scripture, he was just writing.
He was the most prolific of any of his probably preachers or writers at the time.
Yeah, I mean, he was rough around the edges, but I think he was a powerful speaker. Okay, so we're jumped now to the year 47. This is a couple years before the Jerusalem Council, as we talked about last week, that the tensions were high amongst Jews and Gentiles. Which laws, which customs did Gentiles have to adhere to in order to become part of this new movement of Judaism that included non-Jews? So this is the part where I'm just gonna read this narrative, because I think it's actually way better than I could do. So the church, as this is Paul's first missionary journey, so following from, it starts in Antioch there on the right side of your page. The church in Antioch sent Paul and Barnabas out on their first missionary journey. John Mark went along with them as well. The first place they preached was the island of Cyprus. There they made a stop at the Jewish synagogue in the city of Salamis. After traveling through the island, they met a Jewish sorcerer in another city called Paphos. The sorcerer tried to turn the officer he worked for away from Paul and the faith, and Paul responded to him, "You are a child of the devil," and told him that he'd become blind. And so it happened. And the result of that and the teachings about the Lord, the officer believed. So again, this is all happening on that island of Cyprus. After their time in Cyprus, they sailed along to Perga, which is northwest. And while there, John Mark left them and went back to Jerusalem, probably along that landline there around the water coast somewhere. We don't know why he left, but we do know from Acts 15:38 that Paul considered it a fault. He didn't want John Mark to travel with them the next time it was suggested. So clearly there was some tension between John Mark and Paul. Much later, though, in 2 Timothy 4:11, we see that there must have been some reconciliation, because Paul asked Mark to come with him, saying, "He is useful to me in ministry." So even amongst we don't know, maybe he just snored. He was like, "Don't let John Mark come. That dude snores. You won't get any sleep. It'll be a rough journey." And then, they figured out the tape thing. The next stop Paul and Barnabas made was Poseidon, Antioch, and that is the Antioch that's sort of in the northern part, not the Antioch to the east. There in a synagogue, he walked through the Jews through their history. This is in Acts, and pointed to Christ. The Jews' jealousy was sparked by this. Paul announced to them that he would turn to the Gentiles. The Jews, then Gentile, is a pattern he continued to follow in each town he went to. So there was something that happened. He started preaching again. This is before the Jerusalem Council. There's still tension. Another pattern you see is the persecution and abuse at the hands of the Jews. Once that abuse happens here, Paul and Barnabas decide to leave. It's too much. They head from there to Iconium. You see that up there? Mm-hmm. And then Lystra and Derbe, 3 cities in the region of Galatia. And so that's why it says right up there, that region of Galatia. So when Paul writes to the letters to the church in Galatia, he's not writing to a city, he's writing to a region, and he's likely writing to those churches because he visited those on his first missionary journey.
And these are islands or land?
No, sorry, they're the land. The blue part, I tried to match the blue part. That's water.
Oh, okay.
I know, I just sort of tried to give it some shading, some colorful in the game. But the point is when he is writing to his first, theoretically his first book or his first letter to the churches in Galatia, you're seeing he's writing to a group of folks. In Iconium, the Lord proved their message of grace was true by allowing them to perform miracles. Some of the people there agreed with Paul and some didn't. A group of Gentiles and Jews who didn't agree planned to stone them. And when the apostles learned of it, they escaped yet to continue to preach the gospel. So keep that in mind. They're going to these cities and Jews are like, I don't think so. I've been saving this rock for a good stoning. Let's break it out. So after healing a man in Lystra, so that you see that city in Galatia again, the people thought Paul and Barnabas were gods and tried to worship them, probably because they were doing miracles. The apostles were quick to tell them they were only human. They explained that they had come to tell people to turn from their worthless things and instead turn to the living God. Being swayed by Jews, the crowd went from worshiping them to stoning Paul. They even dragged him outside the city once, and they thought he was dead. When the disciples came to Paul, he stood up and went right back into the city.
You're serious.
But think about that for the moment. In this city, Lystra, he was dragged out to the point that they thought he was dead. And he was like, psych. The next day, Paul and Barnabas continued on to Derbe. You're still in the region of, and again, you can follow that on the small map, still in the region of Galatia. And they preached the gospel there. Many believed. Afterwards, they went back through Lystra, Iconium, Pisidia, Antioch. And in each place, they appointed elders for the church and encouraged believers. So if you look on this small map here, see how it goes there and it goes up and it goes back, and then they went back through that path. So that means that Paul's visiting the same communities again, and then he's going back down to Antilla, and then he makes his way back. Each place they appointed elders and churches, and so this is, think about 48, 47, 48. Appointing elders, we as Presbyterians, and anyone who has a hierarchical structure, this is where that notion came from. They're appointing people to remain and to teach in those regions. From there they preached in Perga and then sailed out of Attila and back to Antioch. When they arrived in Antioch, they praised the Lord for his work they had completed. Yep.
How did those churches start? These were the first teachers
Yeah.
coming to them. How have all those churches grown up?
They weren't. They were groups of Jews that he visited that he said, the Messiah lives.
He was starting these churches.
This is like church planting. We say church planting, that's just a mamby-pamby thing in this day. He was going into unknown territory where people might have heard things, but they had and this is the notion of the power of the Spirit. He was being led by the Spirit. And why did people believe? Because, it's kind of like, was it against Judaism? Was it not against Judaism? Was it new Judaism? They're all balancing all of that. And by this time, 20 years after Christ has been on the scene, so it's not as if it was like totally foreign, but still enough that they're like, not in our town, you're out of here. Jim?
Did the other apostles, except Peter, did he travel?
Yeah, others
Did the
traveled.
other apostles go out on missions?
I'm sure that some did, but many of them stayed. They all go out, but the Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth is once you get past Samaria, you're still in the region of Israel.
Yeah.
So Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the world kind of goes from that region beyond. So, and to them, the world wasn't much larger beyond that. You had Egypt, maybe you had the areas in Turkey, maybe to the east, but you keep in mind that their worldview was very, very small. Question. So when you think about it, look at that map. He just made that little tour up top. He basically goes through Cyprus, goes up, and goes all the way through the cities in Galatia, goes back through those cities, reestablishing those relationships, jump in Attila, and then goes all the way back to Antioch, finishing his first journey.
What kind of mileage was that?
I didn't do that. You could probably, do a little pinpoint thing. Who knows how long it took on the boat. So I'm sure actually you probably could ask, there's probably somebody who's done it, but I'm sure AI would tell you. Not that I'm suggesting
I
doing
was
that.
just wondering what kind of journey was this?
It was a 2-year journey.
Okay.
So 49 is the Jerusalem Council. So after his first missionary journey, this is when it's thought that Paul wrote Galatians. Debatable, 48, 49. Again, we don't know. But he's writing, the thought is he goes up, he visits these churches, and he goes back through. He's double visits, spending time with, he's not going just for a day. So he's writing to a church or to a community that he's just been with. And it's thought by mostly, again, that it was his first epistle. It says he wrote the letter to defend the gospel. It was a response to the message that was being spread by false teachers. The teachers were trying to add Jewish traditions to the Galatian Christianity. They were also saying that the religion Paul preached was man-made. People tended to question Paul since he was not one of the 12 disciples or apostles. So Paul remained in Galatia, and that in the Galatian reminded the Galatians that he received the message of grace directly from Christ. Paul is probably is sort of tantamount to Abraham in that regard. That there's this sort of direct supernatural encounter where he's, and in the same way Abraham received righteousness by faith, Paul was redeemed by faith, not by seeing the living Christ. But all right, so and then the Jerusalem Council happened, pretty significant, 4950. And they decided that circumcision was not necessary for Gentiles, that food customs were not binding. And so this starts a huge era in the church. All of a sudden it opens up. Now it's been decided by the group, no more of these things. We're not going to do that. So then sometime in that year after Paul's second missionary journey, armed with this information, he's heading back out. So that's the second part of your map. And if you look at that, it'll follow all the way. And this is by far the largest of the journeys. And it lists it as somewhere between, around 3 years, 2 to 3 years. From Jerusalem, so it starts in Jerusalem, Paul and Barnabas went up to Antioch, and so they're going up the northern coast there. With a group of men, they delivered a message about the decision made at the Jerusalem Council. Paul and Barnabas stayed longer than the other men and preached the word. After some time, Paul suggested traveling to visit believers in towns they'd already been to. Barnabas wanted to bring John Mark along, but Paul refused, saying John Mark snored too much. The conflict was so big that it caused Barnabas to part ways with Paul, and Silas went with Paul instead. So because Barnabas decided he was on the side of John Mark, then Silas he was like, forget it, you're out, you're in. You were like, yeah. So. Okay, Silas and Paul strengthened believers in Syria and in Sicilia. After going, and if you look on that map, after going up there through that region, and then those are the regions he's talking about. He went to Derbe, and they met Timothy and Lystra. So on your map, as you look at this, on your game sheet, when you look at that, this is the first encounter that he has with a significant figure that Acts notes. So Lystra is where he meets Timothy. Timothy was a young believer from Jewish and Greek heritage. Other believers spoke well of him. Because of this, Paul decided to take him along. He had him circumcised for the sake of the Jews in the area that they were trying to reach. After a while, they traveled to the regions of Galatia and Phrygia. I don't know how to say any of these things. Where is that? Did I include that? I don't know if I included that on there. I don't even see it on the other map. I just stood with the map hat on. But it's up in that region. Is it on there?
What's the name?
Phrygia? Or
And it's by where?
it's up near
Darby?
Galatia. It's kind of like moving along. It's probably
Yeah, it's not on.
from those regions. They went to a town called Tros, and then you can follow on that second map there. So now Tros. So they make that big long journey from the Pisidia to Antioch up near Galatia, and he goes all the way across. And my guess is that Cilicia is in that region north of Asia, but he makes it Cilicia. But he goes up to Tros. You see where he goes to Tros?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So we're in Tros now. While in Tros, Paul had a vision of a man in Macedonia asking for help. In response, he headed there immediately. One of the first stops he made in Macedonia was Philippi. So that again is you're looking at the whole region. That whole region is Macedonia, and then still Macedonian territory today. But Philippi, which is where the church in Philippians was, that he was writing to. And while in Philippi, some men had Paul and Silas arrested. This was a result of Paul casting a spirit out of a slave girl. Her owners were angered by this because they had been making money off her. After a time in jail, the city officials asked Paul and Silas to leave, but they didn't. Instead, they went home to a woman named Lydia, and there they encouraged the believers before leaving the town. So actually, I didn't see that. So in Philippi, on your game sheet, you can put a little person, draw a little person next to Philippi, because he also met someone there. I'll add that later. All right, because that'll matter when the game comes time to play the game. They met Lydia there. They encouraged believers before leaving the town. They stopped in Thessalonica, and you see that's up there just west, a couple cities from Philippi. So these in Thessalonica is where he was writing to the churches there. So on his second missionary journey, the relationships he established is why he wrote the Thessalonians. And Thessalonians will be the next books or the next letters written. So whatever happened in Thessalonica was a good thing for Paul. So just think of it like, he went.
And then what year was that?
Probably still 49, 50, probably 50, I would guess, 50 to 51 maybe. While stopped in Thessalonica, Paul preached in the synagogue for 3 weeks. Many believed, including Jews and Greeks. At the end of 3 weeks, jealous Jews rounded up a mob and started a riot. And once again, Paul and Silas snuck away during the night. They stopped in Berea, which is there just southwest. As they always did, they began in the Jewish synagogues. There's your answer, Jim. They went to the synagogues, they went to where the Jews were. The Berean Jews checked what Paul was saying against Scripture, and many of them came to believe. And if you have never heard of, there's a Berean Institute, that's where that's coming from. Unfortunately, the Jews from Thessalonica caught up to them and chased Paul out again. So get this, the Jews from Thessalonica were like, we're going to run them out of the region, not just out of town. They found them all the way over in Berea. Silas and Timothy stayed in Berea a bit longer, possibly to encourage new believers. And then while Paul, and so Silas and Timothy, his two traveling companions, stayed there, and Paul went to Athens. And if you look down to Athens, and Athens is, and I remember Athens is like the heart of Greek mythology, Greek beliefs, Greek ideology, Greek scholarship. This is like, if you want to think about an intellectual capital through most of the world, Athens. So if there was a den of lions ever to be seen, this was the den of lions that he was going to. In Athens, Paul saw many idols, and those idols were representations of the Greek mythological system. There was even an altar to the unknown God, which he addresses. And because the Athenians were into so many gods, because they were polytheistic, again, think of Roman mythology, or Greek mythology, they were more open to hearing what Paul had to say. This is, again, why the convergence of Greek influence on Judaism maybe is the right time that God wanted to come, because this is when the convergence of ideas allowed the very image or the idea of who God is to surface at that time and place in history. He reasoned there in public with both Jews and Gentiles. Some were confused. They thought he was teaching a foreign religion. When Paul spoke in the Areopagus, the meeting place, I don't know how to pronounce these things. What's it? Areopagus, that's what it is. A meeting place. He told them of the superiority of God, the creator of everything, compared to the unknown gods and the object they worship. He talked about Christ's resurrection, which philosophers had problems with. And as a result, some did come to believe. So just to imagine, this is when he addresses all the, there's a whole passage of this in Acts, where all the philosophers are like, what you're saying is, it kind of fits into the system, but they're rejecting him. And because they made money off of the idols, they really didn't want him in town. Because if by the Spirit he's transforming their belief system, then they're not paying money for buying the little things that they need and basically some sort of atonement system, but in a different, a different formulation. But they weren't making money. This is why, Jesus kind of, like they didn't want. Yeah, they were looking for their Jesus loves you so much snow globes. Okay, from Athens, and this is an important move. You see Athens, and then to the west of Athens, you have Corinth. Paul went to Corinth. Corinth is a bustling city. It's not Athens. It's a trade city. It's a freeman city. So you got a lot of foreigners in Athens. You have dominant Greek culture. In Corinth, you have a international culture. It's a port city. It is where people who are freemen go, basically to be able to exercise their freedom. So it's a worldly city, it's filled with wealth, and this is why when Paul's writing to Corinth eventually, he's writing to a city that has materialism surrounding it. It's not like, the pinnacle, but it's a hustle and bustle, and wealth mattered in Corinth. So, and he went to Corinth. There he found another tent-making Jew named Aquila, and that's if you go on your third journey or your second journey there, when he gets down to Athens and Corinth, you see Corinth there. Corinth has that person's head. I guess I should have had two heads there because he meets two people. Aquila and his wife Priscilla, they were Jews that were in Rome and had to flee during Nero's persecution. And then Paul meets up with them, and this is how he learns what's happening in Rome, and probably plants one of the seeds about going to Rome eventually. So they invited him to stay with them, and he did, and they were in diaspora, so they were free. Aquila, Priscilla is the wife's name. Aquila is the guy's name. Aquila. I don't know. I'm not a linguist. I don't try to be. How you doing? And they were able to bring with them a good report about the Thessalonian believers. In other words, after some time, it says Silas and Timothy caught up in Athens. So in other words, things were settling down in Thessalonica. But here's the thing. If they're settling down, it means that it's not in public squares, but it's in, so why would it settle down? Because they're in homes. It's growing, things are good, but they may not be on the public squares. They're not being persecuted in the same way. It says it was then that Paul wrote 1 Thessalonians. And so when you go on your map, if you look, and this is why on your second journey, when, actually I should have one there. If I mistake.
I thought he wrote Thessalonians before that, after Philippi.
Thessalonians. No, so actually in Corinth.
You said about 50. He
Oh, in
wrote
Athens.
Thessalonians.
Oh, Athens, a letter. About 50. Yeah, again, these timelines are general. I mean, from last week, the dates of the things, none of us know these, and this is the challenge. You got to pick something. But and I don't really traffic in the exact times because there's no way to know. But the movement we know from Acts. So they're in Athens. They're caught up in Athens, and so there's a back and forth really between Corinth and Athens. But it was there that he wrote Thessalonians, and then a few months later he followed up with 2 Thessalonians, and it says now he had his friends' help in Corinth. He devoted himself to testifying to the Jews, that Jesus is Messiah. But the point of what I want to make in that is that they visit Thessalonica, then they go, remember, and then they run out, they go to Berea, the people chase them there. Silas and Barnabas stay. Paul goes down through Athens, through Corinth, and that was the big move. That's the part of the story of Paul in his again, second missionary journey, goes to Corinth, all of that, and then makes his way back to really Athens. And then he moves on from there. But he's writing the letter not long, probably less than a year-ish, maybe, after he'd just been. So, and there's nothing strange about this. People write letters to churches or places they visited to say how they're going, to encourage them. So he probably wasn't trying to write scripture. He's writing a letter of encouragement. Okay, Paul, Priscilla, and Aquila all went to Ephesus. And there Paul went on to the synagogues and spoke to the Jews. Priscilla and Aquila stayed there in Ephesus, and Paul left for Caesarea and went to Jerusalem.
How come he skipped those other towns?
I mean, it could have just been, why do you, when you're in the car, you're like, where am I going? All right, so that's that. And there's some years between. So then you have 52, he comes back. And then we're on his third missionary journey, and now he's beginning it, even though he ends in Jerusalem, sometime in the midst of that, he transitions his way, and he begins his third missionary journey in Antioch in the year 52. He was sent, he started, and if you look on this map again over here on the third missionary version, starting point there, he goes up through Tarsus, maybe to visit his homies in his hometown, and he goes back up through Galatia and Phrygia, which again is back over, probably where it says Asia, just calling it by a different name. And then he went to the port city of, it's not? What is it? Oh, it's up there, so he's going up higher. So, you know, we don't, maybe that region, who knows, I don't know where it blended down into that. That's the whole region above that? That, the Viagra is the whole region above Cappadocia?
Phrygia is, not like a giant area, but it's,
That's the next
but
region
it's
up,
kind of, you know, it could be like, maybe here-ish.
in the upper corner of your map.
somewhere, like, because the map I was looking at went out more.
And I will say, if you've ever heard of the Cappadocian Fathers, they are early church patristics who wrote about like Basil the Great, yeah, was one of the fathers. They were the early sort of desert theologians, and that was the desert they were in, just for whatever that's worth. So in Ephesus, Paul spoke for 3 months in the synagogue. Many of the people there were stubborn. Because of that, Paul took the disciples with him and spoke elsewhere in Ephesus and the region. They spent 2 more years there. So a large chunk of this third missionary journey was staying in Ephesus for 2 years. Acts says that all the Jews and Greeks in the province of Asia heard the word, and the Lord's strength, many miracles were done, and Paul sent Timothy and Erastus to Macedonia while he stayed in Ephesus longer. Toward the end of his stay in Ephesus, Paul wrote 1 Corinthians. So that's actually, I didn't do that right. This is his third. So now next to Ephesus, draw a little triangle that looks like a letter.
Rectangle, not
A
triangle.
little rectangle that looks like a letter next to Ephesus. That'll matter for the game.
Right next to the guy.
Yeah, right next to the dude, just to the right of him.
Oh, in Corinth?
And yeah,
Wait,
Third
No.
journey.
no,
No,
and
third
on the
journey.
third journey,
Oh.
second one down, Ephesus.
So you want that square.
Yeah, the little square. It's supposed to look like the letter. I'll get it when I read.
Okay, I see
When
the letter
I.
now. I see the little lines.
This game may be a total
Yeah,
bomb,
line.
just so you
And so
know.
he's writing what?
Right there, he was writing 1 Corinthians. So it's been some time, actually, he's been into the church in Corinth, but he's writing the church in Corinthians, and he's headed in that direction. So he's given him a rebuke on his way, possibly there. He may know he's going, but just this is an early rebuke. So he wrote in response to a report that he'd heard about the new church. He needed to address several topics of the church that were issues they were having. Topics were community, sex, food laws, church gatherings, and resurrection. He gave them instructions on marriage, and some words about singleness and the value of singleness. He was single, so he's expressing some of that. But I think what he, and then also, and he says marriage is not a sin, it's a better option if you can't control your passions. Again, he was a single person. Well, because here's the thing, but you got to remember, in the transformation of Paul and who he was, to that level, if you, like, this is not my world, this is like I'm a resident alien, like the earthly pleasures no longer matter, the only thing that matters is 100% of the time
He was on fire.
I mean, like, you know, proclamation of the gospel nonstop. Marriage was a distraction.
Well, sure.
But that's such a switch from the Old Testament where they were constantly being told to procreate.
But it's the eminent nature of the Old Testament. In the New Testament, they're given a vision of afterlife, of immortality, of this world, upside down kingdom. This world's not their own, so it changes the way. And this is what I preach on constantly. I like, how does it actually seat within us? How do we actually feel that sense of this otherworldliness to the point that it affects our daily behavior? To the point that if we get in an argument with someone, we're like, you know, it doesn't matter. This earth doesn't matter. We should always be striving toward that sense of life. Okay, so he carries on. While in Ephesus, a silversmith stirred up trouble. So in Ephesus, I did put that's the silversmith. I put a few fun characters. Because of the message Paul was sharing with people, they were no longer buying his idols. The city was in an uproar over this. Paul wanted to appear before all of them, but his friends begged him to stay away from the chaos. When it all settled down, he moved to the region of Macedonia. You can see that on that third missionary, when he, up in that whole region, all of those cities. While he was there, he wrote 2 Corinthians. So he still is not in Corinth. Now he's writing a second letter before he's visited them. He's like, I'm going to light them up again.
Between Philippi and Corinth, he wrote this 2 Corinthians.
Yeah.
Why is there not a little?
Oh, wait, here. wanna
Where's
say.
Macedonia?
Shouldn't we draw a letter?
No, did I miss that? So,
On the third
Corinth.
journey?
that's what encouraged me, why he wrote second and Corinth.
Corinth. So there's some stuff between Philippi and Corinth where he was in Berea.
It says, it was an attempt to mend his relationship with them after he had a hard letter he had written. He also wanted to prepare them for a visit. From there, he went down to Greece and paid a checkup on Corinth. So he clearly, looking at the map, he made his way across. I can't really tell exactly. So Berea, we're in the third missionary journey. Then he goes down to Corinth and then Athens, and then he goes back up. But the point is that he wrote the 2 Corinth letters before he was going to visit. That's what I want to make sure you sort of get that sense.
He wrote a letter somewhere between Philippi and Corinth.
He wrote a letter between Ephesus and getting to Corinth. So this whole stretch here on this map here, from here, before he went down there, he wrote the letters somewhere in that region.
Somewhere on Lane.
So we're
Somewhere in Macedonia during
Around
the time.
Philippi.
somewhere around Philippi.
Somewhere around Philippi. Again, we don't know exactly when unless he names it. Some of them he does say where he's at, others he doesn't.
So how was he received, and once he got Corinth, if we've been.
If he, yeah,
Well,
kind
All
of
that
chat
nasty stuff to him.
it was there. Well, it doesn't really actually give us much information on how he was received. They probably, they didn't stone him as he went. And it was there that he wrote while in Corinth. Oh man, I can't believe I've missed all of these. He wrote on his third journey where it says Corinth, you need to put a little letterbox there too, because that's where he wrote Romans.
That's when he wrote what?
Romans, yeah. And keep in mind, this is still early in his writing, but this was meant to be a letter that sort of contained it. Not that he was trying to make scripture. Paul had planned to sail to Syria, but because of a plot against him, he changed his mind. He traveled back instead through Macedonia. That's going up through the water, and then up to Berea area in Macedonia. And Trios, you a hiker? We're not, the hiker center is not open, but the Bible study is available and we have a seat here if you want to join it.
I was just gonna look through here and see if there was something shady.
In the morning,
Okay.
we'll be open at 9. Thank you. In Trios, where he was there, he goes back through Macedonia and he goes to Trios. That's where it talks about Paul raising a young man from the dead. And then on the back it says when he passes through Miletus, he had an Ephesian elder come to him. Goodbyes were said because he didn't know what might happen when he got back to Jerusalem.
So you've got a person next to Traeus, is that the person that he rose from the dead?
Yeah, that's the Trios was the young man from the dead. I wrote down here, almost dead kid.
Almost.
I was trying to get some characters. That's for the game. It really doesn't make a difference, but it will for the game. From there, Paul sailed to Kos, Rhodes, and Patra, and boarded a ship and crossed over to Phoenicia. And then when the ship stopped in Tyre, he spent time with the disciples there. Many of them told Paul not to go to Jerusalem. They all prayed together, and Paul continued on. And Ptolemais and Caesarea, he greeted believers. A prophet prophesied that Paul would be bound by Jewish leaders and handed over to Gentiles when he reached Jerusalem. Many pleaded for Paul not to go, but he stated in response that he was willing to die for Jesus, and that's to die to Christ is to gain. In 57, he's arrested in Jerusalem. In there, he faces the Sanhedrin. He also faces the high priest Ananias, and eventually he appeals to Caesar, and he is allowed to be set free. Paul, in 59, now we're up to the year, that was 57, so you have a couple years when he is in dealing with that high priest, and that's why that high priest is next to the Caesarea there at the bottom. In the final journey, Paul sets for Rome along with other prisoners. He made a stop in Sidon, and you don't have a map for this. They didn't give me one, so you can just kind of look on your map, on your game map. So they made a stop in Sidon, so that's just north of Tyre. The head officer was gracious and allowed Paul to visit his friends there. From there, they traveled a few different boats. At one point, storms were so bad that their ship wrecked. Paul said to the Lord, told them that they would all survive, as the Lord promised. They were able to make it to the island of Malta, which is not on this map. That would be farther east off the map. The islanders there cared for him. Paul survived what could have been a deadly snake bite, he also cured many people on the island. Months later, they finally made it to Rome. In Rome, they allowed Paul to live under house arrest for 2 years. And while under house arrest, he preached to the Jewish leaders, and he continued to proclaim the kingdom of God amongst the Romans. There he wrote Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Philemon. In 62 to 64, he is released. So after being there, he's released after 2 years. And we don't know anything really much about Paul's life at this point, since Acts ends with him under house arrest. But it was after this period that we believe that he wrote 2 Timothy and Titus, and then during Paul's final imprisonment, we believe he wrote 2 Timothy there. And it's thought that he was most likely beheaded in Rome at the age of 56. So I don't know, again, this isn't my forte, I'm not a map, but I hope that helps you just have a sense of his movement through, as I was sort of tracing, just going through my own, thinking about how you move, and it's kind of like, and these, even though these are small, this shows you the movement of the territory that he covered through the Mediterranean.
He's covered thousands of miles.
Yeah, and got stoned and shipwrecked and bit by snakes and all measure of.
I apologize for being late, but was it mostly by water? They sailed mostly?
No, in that picture that here.
This is the water.
Yeah, I know.
So here they're on land,
Oh, okay.
water, and then on.
Yeah, he did some.
Oh, okay, you actually show where he goes on water. Okay.
Yeah. So here, you can have that. So I'm gonna stop this for you online. I guess I'll give the rules. So this is I don't know. Again, I'm making these little games that are designed to help people with confirmand. This is not give you Paul, this tells you Paul's cities of missionary journey. So theoretically, if you took this map and you were just noodling around with it, you could go from city to city and draw a line, and you would get the sense of Paul's journey on all 3 journeys, even to the final one, which ends over here and leaving in Rome. There's no way that, at this point, I'm going to recreate all 4 journeys. That would be a different game for each journey. But what you're going to try to do is you're going to make a journey, and you can start at either Antioch or Jerusalem, since those were Paul's starting points, and one's down here and one's up here, and you can see the grid that exists there. And what's going to happen on your turn is I'm going to roll a die. And if it says 5, where the 5 is, those are the shapes that you can draw. And you can flip them any which way. See those shapes there?
For the journey.
They have 5 spaces associated with them. The 6 has 6 spaces. The 4, and you have to be able to draw the whole. You have to be able to draw the whole shape. You can always draw one. If you can't draw a shape because you're running out of space, you can always draw one, the little 1. You can always just put an X. And what you're doing is you're putting an X. So if I were to do this sheet, if I were to do this sheet and I were to start, and I were to roll 5, and I were to start from Antioch, and 5 has that shape, I could go 1, 2, I'm going to show you here in a second. 1, 2, what's 5? 3, 4, 5. So you can see I made that little T shape that crosses out Antioch.
Oh.
I made this little T shape here. I drew it down there in the grid to make that shape. Make sense?
No, not at all.
So this shape here.
No, I understand the shape, but
So
we
this
could
shape
go
here.
anywhere. We could go to
Yes, but you have to. You
Jerusalem.
start from. But if you started from Jerusalem, then you have to just draw that shape. So Jerusalem is here. You start here. You put X, 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 and X. That's this shape here.
So why couldn't you do that?
You could. That's your choice. That's the game. So you can draw that shape anywhere.
Okay,
Does that make sense down there? See how I drew the T shape there, and I also drew it up there.
okay.
Every shape you draw after that is going to have to go connected to that on an adjacent side. You can go all over the water, it doesn't make a difference. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to visit as many cities as possible with these X shapes.
Okay.
And then if you see, for every city you visited only once, to make the shape, so you can cross over a city, you can cross over the actual city more than once.
Okay.
But if you visit the city only once, which means you didn't cross it off again, and if you cross off the city again because you're putting your shape over it, then circle it. And then if you do it again, then the third time fill it in. But the goal is that you're basically, after, did someone just come in? When anyone reaches Rome, the game ends. All the way on the left side. So you're trying to touch as many cities as you can, and then so you'll get a point for each city you've only visited once, which means only one X on it. And remember, it goes X, and then you do an XO, and then you just scribble it and fill it in. So
So
those
you
are
can't visit a city more than 3.
you can overlap your shapes only on cities. And so, yes, you can visit a city up.
Okay, only on cities.
So, and then what's gonna happen is when anyone reaches Rome, the game will end, and then you'll look and you'll say, for every city you visit once, you'll get 1 point. Every person in a city that you visited, for 1 to 3 people you visited, you'll get 5 points. For 4 to 5, you'll get 7.
So have you tried
And then-
this?
No, this is the first time. I just invented this today.
You're the playtesters.
You're the play. And then if you have a city that has letters in it and you have 3 points for each city that you have letters in, and all cities are where they should say 10 points. Or actually, 1, 2.
I was just wondering if the strategy was better to start in Antioch or in Jerusalem. That's what I was
Well, if you
wondering.
can, if you start in Antioch, you.
That's the rules.
Likely get there quicker to Rome.
I'm stopping it now.
And maybe